Recording. And welcome, y'all. I'm so excited to have you here. I think we'll likely have some folks trickle in as the sun sets. I feel like Francis was just saying, like, if I signed up for this webinar, I'd be out at the park watching. I think this is like we are fully shifted into some evening daylight. So I know that getting on your computer at this time of day can be a little tricky, but thank you all who are here for showing up. I'm going to get us started, but first I'm going to remove the AI meeting notes from our session. We have, we'll be taking notes, we'll be sharing resources, we'll send you all you need to know, so we don't need AI to do that for us. Um, Welcome. So glad you're here. I want to give everybody a minute to settle in. I'm going to share some introductions and then we'll dive in with our guest speakers. Um, we're joined today by three incredible organizers of the West Branch Commons Project in the Catskills region in New York. And this project is really exciting to me because it involves a large dairy farm that's transferring to a collaborative group of next generation farmers. And we have a lot of similar potential land scenarios here in Vermont. So we have a lot of lessons to learn from this project that is in some ways at sort of the early stages of development, as we'll hear, and learn about challenges and successes. And one of the goals of this series is to sort of like inspire folks to start similar work. So I'm really excited to get inspired by the work of this crew. Um, and as you settle in, I'd love to just get a sense for how everybody's doing and invite you to drop in the chat a word or an emoji or both or two to give us a sense of how you're showing up tonight. We live in challenging times, so I want to welcome you here as you are. Your joy, your grief, your celebration, your anger, your sadness, your love, your motivation, your passion, whatever you're bringing here tonight, drop it in the chat so we can see how everybody's doing. For me, these conversations have been a real anchor during these wild times. It's such a gift to be able to explore all the ways that creative people are working together and building pathways and systems that are collective and rooted in care and love for each other and the land. I get so much hope from hearing all of the speakers we've had in this series. And I'm seeing oh no, Tori is sick. That's what I'm gathering. I hope you feel better. I hope this is a relaxing way to spend your time healing. We've got a peace emoji. Grateful to be a part of the learning conversation. So glad to have you here, Nina. Francis, I like what you shared. If you want to say anything about that when you present, I'm curious to hear more. Kitty's sharing some love, appreciative, tired but happy to be in good company, happy to learn from amazing folks, and the sunshine. Yes, yes to all of that. Thank you all for being here, for showing up in the sunshine. Okay, I'm gonna just give a quick check in our waiting room and admit some folks here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Mia, I'm gonna make you a co-host so you can manage the waiting room. Thanks everybody for being here. We're just settling in and getting started by sharing a word or an emoji in the chat about how you're showing up tonight. I'm going to keep us moving, but if you've just joined us, we're happy to have you and would love to hear how you are in the chat via a word or an emoji. All right. So I want to briefly just share our community agreements and invite you as we connect to bring your lived experience to these conversations. We'll have a lot, hopefully, of room during the question and answer to hear from folks. And we're really hoping for a rich discussion. Just a couple of logistical things. I want to note that closed captions are available for this conversation. You can click the button at the bottom of your screen that says CC. And if you have any other needs, feel free to send me a message. Or Mia is here as well from NOFA. Hi, Mia. Can also help if there's other needs or accessibility concerns. I'm seeing some more notes come in the chat. Michelle, hopeful, Isis, sleepy in Italy. Oh my gosh, thank you for showing up here. It's got to be like close to midnight where you are. Happy it's 70 degrees today in NYC. Yes, we were just talking about that before folks joined the call. Yes, it's 60 degrees here today in Vermont, which feels awesome. My name's Megan Browning. I should say that. I work here at NOFA Vermont on the Farmer Services team. It is such an honor and a privilege for me to facilitate these conversations. And I just want to say that I'm not an expert in any of this, but am holding this space for all of you to come together for shared learning. And I've been really excited to dive into researching a lot of these different alternative models. And just, yeah, honored to have the opportunity to bring folks together to keep learning and trying new things. All right. So just to get us a little more connected and aligned, and a few people joined in a few minutes after we started here. I have a little chat box prompt for you, another one. Something I'm curious about that brought me to this webinar is fill in the blank and put that in the chat. Would love to just get a sense of what's on your minds what brought you here? What's one thing you're curious about? One of the cool things about these webinars is that we're hoping to sort of get into some of the nitty-gritty of these projects. And there's just so many layers of what we can talk about and what we can learn about. So hearing a little bit from you all in the chat will help guide our conversation a little bit. Cheyenne, how it works, the commons, technically ground leases, funding, land donations. Maeve, curious about how others are doing commons, projects, farms, and living. Francis, curious about the land access journeys folks are taking on in Vermont and where there might be some overlap and mutual support. Yes, I'm excited about mutual support and overlap as well. Hi, Mike. Curious to hear about how to integrate agricultural land access into community land trust housing developments. Yes, there is a very cool housing component of this project that we're going to talk about, and housing is something that comes up again and again and again and again in all of these. Who else is looking for collective community partners? Michelle, thanks for naming that. This is also a place to connect with the people who are looking for the same things. Isis, interested in market gardening, the type of community in Vermont before we move here. Governance and legal structures, collaborative and cooperative projects. Tori, as funding for farmland access becomes harder, what other ways might folks use to further their farming dreams? Alyssa, interested in all forms of partnerships, and Nina, to learn how to share land collectively within the current system. Cool. I'm curious about all of those things too, and you and many others are feeling curious. We have more than 475 individual registrants in this series, which is a real sign to me that there's so much interest. People registering and interested hold many roles, from farmers, technical service providers, teachers, lawyers, government workers, students. So thank you for showing up and exploring these questions with us. We're going to get started in a few minutes here, but as is our custom in these webinars, I do want to take a minute to honor those who came before us. I'm going to put up a list here of names that have been called forward throughout this series by other participants. They always come through the chat, and I spend some nice time each time we run a new one to pull in all the folks that people are thinking about. So you'll see our running list on this slide. And I want to just invite you to share a name in the chat of someone who's an inspiration for you, an ancestor, anyone who we want to call into this conversation with us tonight. I want to specifically, while you're taking some time to put a couple names in the chat, I'd love to keep adding to our list. I want to specifically lift up and honor the Indigenous peoples, original stewards of all the land we speak about in this series, and honor the roots of the cooperative movement in the Black community who built cooperatives as a way to meet everyone's needs when they're being systematically denied. We are working hard to build a future that cares for all of us and one in which we are all fed, and we really believe it's possible. And I just feel it's so important to acknowledge that we stand on a legacy of deep, deep wisdom that guides us in all of this work. I'm seeing a few names come through. Jacob Beaton of Tea Creek Farm. I see Dorothy Day. Anyone has a name to share, I welcome you to share it. We'll scoop them up and add them to this list. The list is getting longer and longer, and I imagine that some of the folks that y'all are thinking of are on here already. And I encourage you to do your research and learn about the leaders in this movement. So before we dive in, thank you for sharing. Oh, I'm seeing Nina, my late mother, an educator, community activist, and civil rights activist, and Fannie Lou Hamer. Thank you, Nina. And the Diggers of St. George Hill, St. George's Hill. Thank you, Maeve. I'm looking forward to learning about them. Before we dive in with our presenters, I just want to briefly share that NOFA is a membership organization. We have about 2,500 members and are always wanting more and looking to build our numbers and our supporters. And we want to encourage you to join us. We have memberships that start at just $1, and we want you to be part of this movement for the long haul. I think that's all I'm going to say about NOFA because I want to get us into the meat of this series. I do just want to sort of give a quick plug for where we're at in this series. We've been running for this series for 8 months now and have learned from so many incredible farmers and leaders. The conversations are available to watch on our YouTube channel. And we're also keeping a running list of resources. So if you all have resources to share with the group as you're listening, we'll have some space for that at the end as well. Please put them in the chat. And I've got a really cool compilation of all the resources from all the speakers in this series. And we just have one webinar left after this one. It's on April 14th, and it's a really cool project in Minnesota called Commons Land that you definitely will want to learn about. So please join us for that webinar in April, on April 14th, and I'll share around the registration link. It's the same one that you used to register for this webinar tonight. So I think with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Rhiannon and Francis and Kitty to introduce themselves, share about West Branch Commons. I know we're going to learn a lot tonight, and I'm excited that you all are here. I'll let you all, why don't you all start talking, and while you're doing that, I'll shift the slides.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan, for the grounding and the intro. My name is Francis Yu. I say them pronouns. I'm part of the board with West Branch Commons. We are a community land trust project. We're in Delaware County and upstate New York in the Catskills region. We'll get into that a little bit more. I just also want to give a little bit of space for Rhiannon and Kitty to introduce themselves up top here before we jump into the presentation. And I think that there's going to be plenty of room for conversation, for questions, and a little bit of back and forth as well.
My name's Rhiannon Wright. I am employed through Catskills Agrarian Alliance right now on the West Branch Commons project. I live in Delaware County as well in the Catskills, and I'm farming up here. I've got a nursery focused on agroforestry stuff. I can pass it to you, Kitty.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kitty Williams. I am a farmer and educator here in Delaware County. I live in Walton, and I am also the co-founder and co-manager of Iridescent Earth Collective, which I'll tell you a bit more about in my talk. Excited
Awesome.
to be here.
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, Rhiannon. Yeah, so just up top, I want to give a little bit of a context and framing for West Branch Commons, essentially what we are addressing or really hoping to address, what is the kind of like broader vision of this project and what the context around land access for us looks like specifically in New York State. Can you go to the next slide, please, Megan? So today we're going to talk about, again, kind of that broader context. Katie will jump in and chat specifically around their project with Iridescent Earth Collective and the journey that they've had around land access and where they currently are with the collective. We're going to talk also kind of about the timeline, the many kinds of conversations and partners and folks who've come along the way to help really create this project and make it a real reality and talk a little bit about the ecosystem, the constellation as we call it, supporting this project. We'll talk a bit about CLT mechanics. I think when we get to that point in the conversation, I'll just kind of ask folks generally how folks feel or folks sort of like comfortability around community land trust and what that structure is. So we can kind of get a sense of where folks are at and figure out together how deep to get into the weeds. We'll talk about our fundraising plan and what that breakdown has been, how that process has unfolded, certainly where the gaps are. And then we'll talk about also kind of like what we're foreseeing to be the operational project budget. And then just we'll wrap up in terms of what kind of parting thoughts we might have for folks who are potentially considering a similar model or process as this. And then we'll have, again, time for some deep conversation. So I'm going to start up here, which, I think when I talk about this land access piece, folks are largely thinking about, um, this context for new beginning for young farmers. Certainly knowing and understanding that land access is a primary barrier that we face in this space. Um, but I think for me, one of the critical, and I think compelling aspects of this project is that it's also a farm transfer project. It's how we're thinking about an extension of farming as a legacy within Delaware County and in this particular space in the West Branch uh, River or headwaters of the Delaware River. And West Branch Commons is situated in a farm called River Haven Farm. Tom Hudson is the fourth generation steward of this space. The Hudsons have essentially done dairy over, the four generations that they've been here. Maybe a few decades ago, have transitioned that operations more towards meat cattle. But in this kind of whole time, Tom has been the primary steward and caretaker of this space. With this question of how then to think about farm transfer, he has no heirs to transfer the business and transfer the land to. He has siblings that have moved, have their own thing going on, care deeply about Tom, but don't necessarily foresee farming as a future. So really, this land holds a lot in terms of the Hudson's legacy in the space. And a real question of, what does it mean to transfer that? How do we think about the connection to a new generation of farmers in this space? So I think that that's, a context I'd like for us to sit with, and we can sort of share a little bit more about what that dynamic is, which is one of my favorite pieces about the story. But in 2021, Tom started having deeper, more intentional conversations, both with neighbors, folks within the community, and also some of the deep connections that Tom has had with folks with American Farmland Trust New York, of which Tom has been a partner with for, I want to say, 2 decades. And they started having conversations like, Tom is currently 75 and thinking about what is the strategy, what is the plan for him to start to think about this transition of this land, of this business, of this stewardship. Next slide, please. And just a quick zoom out a little bit in terms of New York State, you know, I think I'm speaking to the choir here in terms of like how we are thinking about land as like a really critical and important resource for us. And in New York State, we are losing about 51 acres of farmland every day to competing development. And these are older numbers. I suspect that these numbers are probably a bit higher. And the cost of farmland has also risen by more than 50% over the last decade. So both these compounding pieces of the incredible competition in terms of farmland, the rising cost of farmland itself, contribute to this last piece here around farmers of color really making a really minuscule part in terms of the broader composition of New York farmers and farm owners. Obviously, there are decades and decades and decades of historically exclusive, racist, and exclusionary policies that have created these dynamics, right? And so, these are kind of like just the landscape conditions that we are grappling with in New York State. I'd be curious to hear sort of where the context is in Vermont and where other folks might be calling in from. But that's just to kind of like name what are some of the pressures that we are dealing with and grappling with and facing with this project and broadly around land access in the state? And so all of those pieces come together and really have like pushed us to really think creatively, boldly, expansively about, what kind of models for farmland access, farmland transfer can we think about? And we were really inspired by the community land trust model. I think certainly for the community and collective governance aspects of it, which I think are key value propositions that we have, but then also the piece around decommodification. We're not only looking as land as resource, as something that we kind of in a broadly global capitalistic food system, are always extracting and exploiting from, but really thinking about the land as an extension of ourselves, as something that we belong to and have a responsibility to steward. And I think that this sort of structure is like in this camp of like being able to decommodify and not really think about this as like purely this real estate commodity. Um, and what we're working with is we're, really hoping to preserve 287 acres of this amazing river bottom farmland to be affordable, accessible, and in farmland in perpetuity. And not just as a this generation kind of farmland access project, but really something that has the ability to offer, generations of farmers a real viable opportunity in terms of agriculture within our food shed. So with that, I want to turn it over to Kitty to just share a little bit about, their journey around farmland access, both through the personal and through their work with Iridescent Earth Collective.
Thank you, Francis. And it's funny because I was just thinking you were describing the importance of like the development of this project at the time that it came to. And a thought that came to mind was like, yeah, and it was crucial that it was developed, it is being developed grassroots style by farmers, not just the incoming groups, but like Francis is a farmer, Rihanna is a farmer, I'm a farmer, like all of IEC is a farmer, Sarah Vita is farmers, Tommy is a farmer, Berry Brook Farm is on the managing board. And so just these are people who have kind of lived in the throes of something new like that for a long time. And it's been really inspiring for me and the folks on my project. Um, as Francis said, my name is Kitty. I introduced myself as well. And I am the co-founder of Iridescent Earth Collective, which is currently a collective of queer farmers and herbalists and dancers and healers and butchers and bakers and all these people who kind of clammed onto and sped up into Delaware County. And obviously, we didn't all start there. You can go to the next slide. So, myself and my colleagues, C and Jessica, and I'm sure other people, I'm sure many folks on the call, when you get the opportunity to steward land, especially when it comes all wrapped up like this, the Corbin Hill farmhouse with the Blackyard Farm, it was kind of like, we have this land and we need Black farmers on it. And so, friends and I crammed together, gathered our stuff together, got as much stuff together to start farming on that land. And it ended up not even working out. After 2 months, we were over at Guernsey's nursery in Schoharie, which is great. And I think the point of that is like, we didn't have the money, we didn't have all of the resources and connects, but we really were committed. I imagine other people are too. And it's a fight to get to where you want, but it's important to do that fight. We also met in 2021, as Francis pointed out. We met Tiana and Tommy Hudson, the farmer, and it kind of inspired us to move more towards an agrarian common style of living than what we were doing, and to move towards that project. Part of that obviously is like shoring up our distribution points. So the main focus of Iridescent Earth Collective as a farm project is food sovereignty, community care, radical authenticity. And so over the course of the couple of years, we've been working with other farmers, connecting with Star Route, Berrybrook, Lucky Dog, all these big farms in the area, to learn how to farm, to learn how they do it out here, and also to start to sew together a network that is supportive for folks like ours. You can keep moving on the slides. This is us at Star Route Farm in 2022, which was really fun and hard, and we learned a lot. We had one idea of what it was going to be like on the farm, and then it bust our asses. And it ended like a really beautiful way. It was like, oh, okay, we need to like think about markets. We need to think about propagation, and like also you have to be in the field all the time. You have to think about the weather all the time. And so like these were really formidable years. As we were developing out the West Branch Commons, we were learning about eating together, barbecues, like parties as a way of networking. So important. Like something that I thought too was going to be really, I thought for some reason that we would be community rejected. And like, look at this. Like, the community ate this up. They love it. All of the older farmers in the area came in all tough and were kind of like, you sure you want to farm? And like now they're like rooting for us. They're showing up on our farm. Tommy dissed the land for us. Eleanor and Patrick till the land for us. We do propagation and storage at the big farms in the area. You can keep moving. And this over the course of the years, the organization has developed, brought people up from the city, and also brought people in from the surrounding community. We started really small. Now we're 10 people deep with several different programs, including Farmers Lunch, which is started out of the Hamden General Store, which is through a relationship with the folks at the West Branch Commons. This whole project, even like our first meetings, were at the General Store, we're at Lucky Dog, these different places that are crucial to building a network that supports young farmers like us and small farm projects that are interested in this kind of thing. We've hired staff. Our group is so big now. We do cooking and demos and parties and all the fun stuff. Yes, we still struggle. We need money. Everybody needs money. But I think the kind of infrastructure that we're trying to build out with West Branch Commons is really important to a farm like this, a program like this. And I think that Sarah Vita would say the same thing. Like, it's been crucial to us being up here. That's my timer. But yeah, this is us. We got youths, a couple 24, 25-year-olds, really sweet kids, and our families come up all the time. It's great. That's us.
Thank you so much, Kitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good like way, I feel like, to ground us in a bunch of slides that are going to be like much more technical and information dense, because like we are a crew of people who like primarily are like relating to one another, right? Like we're in relationship, and this is the structure that we've kind of like, yeah, reverse engineered to make work what is actually happening on the ground. So this is, yeah, a portion of our organizing team that has been, we've been working on this project since 2021 for 5 years. And as is true of, I'm sure, like so many other people in this room and people who have participated in this series ongoing, like it's a response to the direct realities on the ground of like, we had this landowner, we have these, farmers that are looking for land. We have a group like Catskills Agrarian Alliance, who is, like a network of farms, all aggregating into one CSA. that is, this group of people who are looking to bring more farmers onto the land and like help each other out. Um, and yeah, the that is the story and the flavor behind all of what is to come in the rest of this presentation is just the like being together and relating, and like truly the only thing that could have made us can make us continue to try to do this like kind of impossible thing is like those relationships. So so here's our organizing timeline. Like Francis mentioned, Tom started having like some more serious conversations. Second heart surgery in 2021. People were like, "All right, Tom, let's talk. Let's figure this out." We've been meeting weekly since 2022 as a group. Like Kitty said, primarily of farmers that are in the neighborhood, all within, like most of them are within a visual distance to the project, but anywhere, I'm sure the same is true in Vermont, anywhere within like 40 minutes, you're a neighbor, right? So that's kind of the spread of this project. We started working with the Pace University Farm and Food Business Law Clinic in 2022 to help us consider what sort of legal entity we were trying to form. In 2023, American Farmland Trust acquired the land. They bought the farm from Tom, and they are holding it temporarily for us as we raise the money to buy it. IEC and Saravita began their leases on the land in 2023. American Farmland Trust, as the current landowner, holds their leases. In 2024, PACE helped us to file as a 501c3 CLT, which Francis will talk a little bit more about later, why we ended up choosing that model. In 2025, we were awarded a SARE grant, which has been super, super important for our admin capacity. As we'll talk about, you need people to make projects like this really flow. So my time, Catskills Agrarian Alliance is the one that holds that grant. We were still very, very fresh on the having our legal entity, and so Catskills Agrarian Alliance was a strong applicant for that. Francis, were you going to jump in on something?
I was gonna make a quick note around some of the technical assistance support, just in case we have folks of that flavor in the crowd here. Um, One is a note around the weekly meetings, which is a lot, and I think for farmers, at different capacities, like a weekly commitment is, a bit much. And so one of the things that we knew since the beginning is like how do we embed or how do we like balance a level of flexibility that is necessary for farmers while still keeping folks engaged and keeping the project moving? So in terms of how we structure that, and it's always sort of like a different variation of this, at different points throughout the season, but um, there is usually someone within the team. It's either, formally at I was formerly a co-director at Catskills Agrarian Alliance, so I had like just like the organizational capacity to support and show up weekly, and had the resources to to pay for my time and to like think about follow-ups and do kind of the due diligence of that. So I would show up weekly and kind of like be the holder of the notes and the stream of consciousness and the conversations that were happening and all of the various communication pieces. Rhiannon has since over like the past year really kind of stepped into that role more. So we've kind of like shifted capacities in that way. But someone sort of like stable, constant, but then with the farmers, giving them the flexibility. And I think our expectations these days that, we're meeting weekly, folks can try to aim for, two meetings a month. Amazing. If you can make one, great. And I think that just like, keeping the momentum moving and just like really having someone be the holder of that momentum is really key. While then also kind of like respecting like the level of flexibility that farmers, really need, especially during, the peak season. Um, and I think the other part that I was going to say around the technical assistance piece is that I think that, Rhiannon, you mentioned you being an employee of Catskills Green Alliance. I think in a similar capacity when I was with that organization, like having a home, like an organizational home to do this work and where West Branch Commons was at one point sort of like incubating. That was also a key part that I just want to underline as um, a stream, like a constant stream that was present here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk more a little bit about the partnerships as like an absolute must for these types of projects a little bit later too. So yeah, in that vein, Equity Trust is another community partner that we have started working with as of 2025. Part of our fundraising stack is a loan from Equity Trust. They are a nonprofit who I'm sure lots of people in the room have heard of. They've done amazing work with community land trusts over the past number of decades. So they are both a values aligned partner. They're also interested at their core of like how do we decommodify land? How do we form new relationships to how we hold land? And they have all of this like amazing technical assistance on staff of working with other community land trust projects in the past. So we're really, really happy to be working with them. They were flexible with us to we applied for this loan in the summer of 2025 and we just have a letter from them of approval essentially saying that at the point of closing, so in the hopefully our goal is to close on the property in December of this year or in the fall of 2026. They were like, great, here's your your pre-approval letter essentially for a loan that you can execute at that later date. So throughout all of this year so far and then into 2026, we're going to be working on a lot of really amazing programming through this SARE grant. We're convening a community of practice for community land trusts, which maybe we can chat more about in the Q&A. I would love to hear what everybody else is doing and who they're talking to in the community land trust space. One of our farmers, Sarah Vita Farm, is also hosting an apprenticeship program with some folks at community gardens in the Bronx, bringing people up to see what production level farming looks like. So all of these things are ongoing. We're overlaying with working on, what is our lease terms and structure look like, and hugely fundraising. Like fundraising has been a massive amount of labor and will continue to be. So you can head to the next slide. So all of that kind of processing has led us to these kind of pillars of what our structure is like. We are, again, a 501c3 community land trust. The model is that West Branch Commons as the entity will hold the land in perpetuity and will offer long-term leases to independent farm businesses. So the businesses on the property are not reliant on one another for any sort of like economic commingling. They are going to be sharing space and in an ideal future, sharing beautiful, amazing state-of-the-art infrastructure and equipment. As Francis mentioned, the farm has primarily been a dairy farm and then a livestock operation, as well as row crops, corn, soy, hay, for the past many decades. So most of the infrastructure that is present is catered to those types of production. So as we bring on more small diversified veg production and things like that, we're going to need to be making additional investments, coolers, those types of smaller scale implements, tractors, things like that. And yeah, this project is primarily to serve queer, trans, and BIPOC farmers. We're about, making land available to people who wouldn't otherwise have access to it. You can head to the next slide. These are our 4 farmers on the land now. You've heard from Kitty from IEC. C. Matthias is Sarah Vita Farm. Tom is the legacy farmer who remains on the property with too many cows, arguably. He's oughting to be downsizing, and he is finding that difficult to do. The Bergen family farm is who maintains large portions of the property right now in that corn, soy, and hay. All right, Francis, over to you. Some more mechanics.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll give just sort of like the brief little bits about community land trust, and I think if folks have questions, clarifying questions, structure questions, we can also just do that, or you can toss it in the chat. So community land trust essentially, one of the ways that it acts as a land preservation tool is that it separates the cost of ownership and burden in terms of the cost of the land and then the cost of the structures and the investments that happen on the land. And separating, decoupling those two pieces allows the CLT entity, so in this case, West Branch Commons, to really hold the deed to the land and provide uh, long-term ground lease terms at an affordable rate with sort of like a real commitment to that affordability based on, the target demos that we are hoping to support here. It, is a fairly, I think, popular like alternative model in like the affordable housing space that we're seeing. So I think we're seeing a lot of projects in the CLT housing space. But it also has, agricultural roots, first CLTs in the US really sort of being a way to preserve Black agrarianism and preserve Black autonomy in the South, sort of post Jim Crow. So thinking about this as like a legacy of that, I think is really important. Um, and in terms of how we actually structure the governance and how that is baked into, the bylaws, um, the board structure is essentially a tripartite structure. So there are three main components. One component is the lessee representative, so the folks who are on the land, who hold the ground leases. So they have essentially like a key role in terms of the governance, how the project, how sort of the land is stewarded, all of the various aspects that relate to that. The lessees have a real seat at the table. The other third are sort of general representatives um, who might hold some sort of like technical expertise on the land. So folks that might be a housing operator, someone who might be providing business technical assistance, who are kind of generally familiar with the agricultural um, environment within like this particular community. And then there's another third of the structure that is more broad, open public representatives that's just open to the community writ large. So really thinking about, how can we hold a project through this community perspective and lens and really kind of think of the governance from this perspective. And so it's I think we're actually very close to this sort of like tripartite structure. The one thing that I will say, and it is a caveat and it's a legal caveat, is that because WBC does not own the land yet, the current lessees cannot be on the board because it would present as a conflict of interest. But that doesn't mean that they're not part of the conversation. And in fact, like, folks like Kitty and folks from the Iridescent Earth Collective, see Matthias from Sierra Vita, they're very active in sort of how this program shifts and moves and grows. And that's through something that we've been calling an organizing committee, which comprises right now of existing board members and then also member lessees who are thinking um, about most of the organizational development work, but I think we're just careful to make sure that, when it is important and appropriate to, recuse the member lessees of any kinds of conversations that might, provide some sort of like real benefit for them in the long run, that we're careful about how those conversations happen so that there's no conflict of interest. Um, I saw it in the chat earlier in terms of how this was going to be determined, and we haven't gotten there yet. But the ground lease piece, in terms of how we're sizing that and what that looks like, we don't quite have that down yet. There's some things that are still pending that I think are going to be key for us to having that conversation in full force. Namely, that is kind of just like what is the final appraised value of this site that I think will sort of be a really big contributing factor in terms of how we size the parcels and what the associated costs will be for that. So I think that that's part of like that's just information that we want to have before we like sit down and think about like how do we start to like think about the ground lease structuring. Farmer criteria, I think, is also something that we are in the process of like actively developing, especially as we work towards closing this year. We really hope to get some new lessees or folks on the land, some new energy by the 2027 season. So this is sort of like, both of these pieces prior to acquisition are really like core structural governance pieces that we are holding. In terms of the safe harbor, I think like in terms of how do we make sure that this is, we're keeping an eye towards affordability. We're borrowing here from the affordable housing model in terms of how we would, structure some of the income requirements to make sure that we are focusing the supports here for low income tenants. So this is, predicated on the area median income in Delaware County. I think it's somewhere around like high 50,000, low 60,000s, I believe. So we can get into the numbers as well. Essentially, all this is saying is that we want to make sure that the 75% of the lessees on this land are folks who otherwise would not have like the cash or income means to access this land access. You can go to the next slide. Sis, I think we're going to get to that in just a second. Oh, no, no, no. Rhiannon, you did in a past site, but there's four current lessees on the site at the moment. Um, we are currently having a conversation with Growing Homes in terms of shaping out a housing partnership with this group. Growing Homes is a organization essentially focused on affordable farmer housing in the Hudson Valley and beyond. And they haven't had any specific, in the ground projects yet. They are still kind of in the process of incubating, and they're doing that project or that process of incubating with Glenwood. And so our kind of initial hope right now is to really think about like what affordable, permanent, long-term housing opportunities exist for farmers, either within the context of something that is on site within the existing 287 acres, or, potentially thinking about a scatter site community land trust model, and like, purchasing, homes as they come up for sale in the surrounding area to then be available for affordable farmer housing. In terms of our fundraising goal, our full goal is $950,000, and that is the majority of that is, the site acquisition. Right now, we are sizing that at $763,000, which is what the land was appraised in 2023. It's currently being appraised as we speak, and I think in the matter of like the next couple of weeks, we'll have the updated figure there, which will surely have increased. Then there's like, a remainder balance of that, the $187,000 as it stands right now, just to give us basically like a year and a half, pushing 2 years of operational funds to make sure that we have, just some space to breathe and have our legs underneath us. We're about 60% of the way there. And in terms of the existing funding stack, um, we have about $370,000 from foundations, primarily regional foundations in the area. We have a, quite small share of individual donors, but still kind of, I think, really important to think about the crowd and peer-to-peer fundraising aspect of this as a community effort. And then, Rhiannon also talked a little bit about equity trust. So finding a values aligned lender that can give us, a below market loan for this. And we're probably, capped at that loan product. So we have a $200,000 loan from Equity Trust. And that's probably it because we don't want to incur more debt service so that we can maintain an affordability. So we're really kind of capping it at 200,000.
Yeah, with the caveat or the, you may notice piece that like grants are not in that list. I'm sure everyone in this room has looked for grants for land acquisition at some point or another, and they don't really exist. There was some super promising things coming out of the USDA with the access to land capital and markets bill proposed by, I believe, National Young Farmers was the one who was like really championing that. We know the state of federal funding for these types of things. It doesn't really exist in the same way. There are some potential New York programs that are maybe coming out at a state level to help with land acquisition, but yeah, for anybody looking to do this kind of a project, grant funding is not really on the table. So that's been a struggle, but something that we're working through. This is a super rough projection of our expected revenue and expenses as an organization. Um, an entity, requires maintenance to be running. So I think as soon as you start to consider this type of like a 501c3 model, or really any, even in like an LLC or something, it's going to require ongoing operational expenses. So our revenue model is such that the leases are not what is making the train go. Like, that is not the point of this project. The point of this project is to offer affordable farmland. So it is really projected to be like only 10% of our needed revenue. A much larger percentage, we're looking at having hopefully sustained foundation funding. If you know of foundations that love to work with people in unrestricted ways over the long term, please send them our way. And we are expecting a lot of really great opportunities to do education and programming on the land that, for more traditional grant sources like USDA Beginning Farmer Grant Program, those types of things. So the expectation is that this will require ongoing fundraising for, for perpetuity. Our minimum expected expenses in order to do so are around $150,000 a year. That is to include some staff members, people to do admin, fundraising work, people to run the programs that we have funding for, and then a like on the ground site supervisor maintenance person. We'll have occupancy expenses around just maintaining all of the land, the debt service to equity trust, and then around just like 6% for professional fees, software, accounting, things like that. This does not include, notably, any of those major infrastructure investments. So if we're going to be doing those types of projects to like, build a beautiful wash pack or something like that, then that's going to be on top of this. This is like our bare minimum expected expenses. And I'm sure the closer and the longer that we look at this, the more that these numbers are going to rise. We can head to the next slide. So for other people considering, the biggest limitation, I think, to the community land trust model is that it's limited equity building opportunities for leasees. I think there are a ton of really promising resources. Megan has shared some with me that have come out of this very series for other ways that people are thinking about giving the opportunity for equity building. I know that there are some projects that do like a community land trust for housing where people can basically they would be able to sell their lease potentially at like a fixed rate to the next farmer perhaps, or maybe we could be doing like offer some sort of like retirement account for farmers, or even something like health insurance, or even like education around how to do retirement savings and what are people's other options. So I think that equity building is something that I would love to talk to more people about in the room tonight, hopefully in the Q&A, about what people's ideas are. I think it's also a good time to point out that there are like lots of good potential outcomes for people that come onto the land. So it's not like the only outcome is that somebody comes and has a 99-year lease and stays for 40 years or whatever. People might be able to use this as an opportunity to get a mortgage. Like if they can get their farm off the ground without making a huge investment into the land, maybe they stay for 5 or 6 years and then they're able to qualify for a mortgage and they can, move off. Or, maybe an outcome is that somebody decides to get out of farming, like they don't want to do this and they're not in loads of debt from having tried to do so. So the equity conversation is an interesting one that, I think we're going to need to be doing more work on that. The other two pieces on here are the admin burden. It's real. I don't think that there is a scenario where there's not an administrative load of having a collective land project. I think for a 501c3, you have I don't know. I don't think that there's like a right or a wrong way to organize these types of projects. Like I know some people do LLCs, some people are doing like a true collective farm project where like the farm is one farm with many different people on it. So I don't think there's like a right or a wrong way to do it, but we will have, like that slide showed, ongoing operational expenses that, the project is not necessarily like a low cost project to run. It is the object is that it is an affordable land opportunity for farmers, but the burden of keeping that project going is not necessarily a low dollar amount. And the shared infrastructure is something that is more theoretical at this point. We have a lot of like wonderful decrepit buildings that we are inheriting a laundry list of maintenance things to do for. But there will likely be, kind of like a ceiling of what is, we're going to have to do a good job, I think, of thoughtfully curating farmers that have a complementary list of needs where we maybe have people, just a certain number of vegetable farms that all want to be using the same equipment at the same time and, patch people in a way that makes sense for infrastructure. You can go to the next slide. So again, we kind of have been through most of these, but I would say that honestly, the number one thing to have on your side is time. Kitty leading off with all of the like relationship illustration, that is what these projects are built on. And for them to last, they need to have, like good, solid relationships as the underlying current there. A well-prepared landowner is a nice to have situation. We were working with somebody who was like having a lot of forethought about what was going to be happening next. And it's just that much harder if the land is like already on the open market, or if, lots of times people pass away without a will or without like a plan in place. So as much as possible, like trying to work with somebody who is like still actively farming and like isn't, necessarily like retiring tomorrow. Francis mentioned this as well, but the organizational support has been critical. This project is powered by a lot of farmers who are volunteering their time. And there's been also a lot of paid hours that have gone into it. So I think it's a great opportunity for, ag service nonprofits that are in the area to take on this burden of being that ongoing administrative home and being willing for process to go really slowly. Like I think us having a super friendly home in Catskills Agrarian Alliance has been critical to the success of this project. Especially even just like legally as a starting point of, like my time and Francis's time, West Branch Commons did not have to like hire employees or anything to get this going. Like that infrastructure existed under Catskills Agrarian Alliance, and that's kind of where we're rolling with it for now. Relationships with farmers is also key. Catskills Agrarian Alliance has all of these existing relationships with farmers, and I know there are lots of organizations, across the Northeast that are nonprofits that do some sort of work with farmers. But I think the like existing relationships is really important. And then money, as discussed, the grants are not there. The money is present. You just gotta, know the right guy to talk to. All right, we can pass it over to Kitty to wrap it up.
Thank you, Rhiannon. And I was just going to piggyback on the money thing because it's the next slide. It says, of course, like it's more than just a farm. And I think that needs to be made clear. Like this project, yes, is farming and farming related, but it's really a land transfer. It's really land stewardship. It's really racial equity. Like this is a really beautiful opportunity we've been handed to learn collectively and collaboratively how to steward land in perpetuity and to do it together. I've learned as my collective has grown that the people that you meet, farmers or not, the dancers, the musicians, the artists, all of them help to build out the world that we want to see in the future. All of y'all aspiring, farmers who want to do this, all of the folks who have money, who want to put it somewhere good, all the folks who have land like Tommy, who don't want to see that turned into developments, and who think it's important to have like a community that is building wealth and that is doing the right thing for us, that's feeding people, that's providing space for folks like myself and like C and others to really engage with the land and the community in a way that is authentic and that is really with love at its heart. Um, yeah, it's more than a farm. This is like my life's work, and I think for many others as well, it's life work. And the only other thing I was going to say, Rhiannon, is like on top of time, like that time gives you an opportunity to deepen your connections, which is like an extremely important part of this project. It didn't just happen because we're in the right place at the right time, but the right people were there. And that's going to continue to happen in other places and spaces, and people have to be ready to do that networking, to be ready to trust each other and to build together so that the future vision we have includes everyone.
I think we just have one more slide with
Post this, give us money, post this.
yeah. We have a crowdfunding campaign. Our framing for it is that it's a community down payment. So 20% of our total project cost of $190,000 we're looking to raise through like small grassroots donations. So let us know if you can help with that. We really appreciate you being here. We also have a Substack that you can subscribe to.
Awesome. Thank you. One of you, if you would, please put the fundraiser link in the chat so people can not delay in throwing some financial support your way. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And thank you all for your really like excellent account of many years of work and relationship building. I think you did a beautiful job of sharing sort of like the story of what's been going on and also some really key details about just the dynamics and the issues you're addressing and the work it takes and the money it takes. And it's such a beautiful project and also just like such an effort. So thanks for getting in the weeds with us. Um, Let's open it up now to a conversation. You're welcome, those of you who are here, to put a question either in the chat box. You can unmute at any time and ask a question out loud. You can also use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raise a hand if you want me to call you in. I'm happy to do that. I have some backup questions and like some questions that came in through our registration form that we can ask, but would love to just make a little space for y'all to digest what you heard and share any reflections or questions on your mind. Mia popping in. How did you begin building structures around communication? Do you have a plan for conflict resolution? Yes, great place to start. Thanks, Mia.
That is a part of our SARE grant that we applied for, is working on our internal policies. That's in the frame of like the work of making a 501c3 is like, okay, now we get to make all of the administrative policies that go along with having a 501c3. But I think we're super excited to be working with a really amazing facilitator who's helping us with like a democratic organization framework and like how can we, do all of these things in a way that feels like not like it's just filling in the blanks of the normal nonprofit structure. So yeah, we're working on in 2 weeks, we're getting together to work on, creating a conflict resolution process and deciding on, we're making a farmer relationship management plan. So just like making sure that everything is out in the open about what farmers can expect from us, from West Branch Commons, and what we expect from them, and the lease terms. There's like a lot of things still to be worked out in that regard. But yeah, I don't know, Francis or Kitty, if you would add.
Yeah, I think what I would just like, quickly add around like the communication structures is that again, we just have like a one of the constants is like the standing weekly in which, one of us is holding and stewarding and making sure we've got that. There are detailed notes for folks who don't make it to meetings to be able to like review and catch up on, so that they are like, we're always like making sure that folks have up to date information. And I think the retreats are an important space. We'll have them, usually twice a year around like very specific topics. I think this one is going to be largely around governance, decision making, and conflict resolution as, really key pieces around the relational and trust building aspect. I think that that's going to be key. And I think as someone who's done a lot of TA for this project over the last several years, and I think just like a general um, I think perspective that I bring into any kind of work that I'm in is really just thinking about, especially with a an effort that is like containing like so many different people and players and stakeholders, like how do we like make sure that we're meeting folks where they're at? And I think that that often requires like a little bit of extending and retracting and expanding and and I think that it requires a lot of like a dynamism that is constant and present. And so like also how do we make sure that like we're building in and backing in kind of like the time, the resources for something like that.
Um, I was just going to speak to the perspective of conflict within the organization itself. So not West Branch, but within Iridescent Earth Collective. We've worked with a family therapist before. We still work with that family therapist, and we kind of shaped with her a variety of tools to deal with conflict. Um, I think the important thing and something that I have experienced shows up with value alignment is that typically when there is conflict, it's less like somebody hates another person, we hate each other, or we can't come to it. It's just like we're talking past each other, or like the needs of everyone within it aren't being met. And so I feel like there's some aspect of conflict resolution that is also just like about providing people with communication tools because we don't come with them. So like in our group, we everyone has to read through all the conflict stuff and like have the tools ready so that when we go into things, we have some tools to process what we're feeling.
That's a helpful point, and I think that that's a key part of where we are in the process is like zooming out at the WBC level, which is, we in preparation for the retreat that we have in a couple of weeks have, a slate of materials that we've been reviewing around conflict and accountability and navigating that and what are the core pieces about personal accountability and apology setting and how do we create the space where we are enabling ourselves to be accountable for our own actions and really think through like what are the tools that we have to communicate these pieces. So I think Nina, to the question that you have on the chat, like a lot of that is still in like in the process of like being like co-created and developed together. Um, but I think that, one thing that I will say is absent of a formal structure and it's not to say that we haven't like managed or navigated conflicts throughout this process. We certainly have. But I think what has been key in navigating and holding that is like where do we come back to like what is the shared vision? Like how do we make sure that we are prioritizing the thing that we have come together for and where disagreements have popped up or conflicts have come up, how do we if it's a moment where we can't necessarily get past or it's not like a easy sort of like, you know, elegant solution, how do we like make space to see each other? Make space to like hold multiple truths and then like just like hold a common vision that like we're like holding and stewarding together. So I think that that for me is like a piece that I have, always come back to. And then I do look forward to like actually having more like concrete, hey, here's the steps, hey, here's the process. And I think that that's going to be key. I think we've had like uh, I think both like the pleasure and all the ways and like the complications come with like we've been able to do this like in community with folks that we know and have gotten to trust and like build relationships with over the past 5 years. And I think as we open this up to new lessees, like we're opening up to like a lot of folks that we might not have that grounding with. So I think that that's like where actually like a key or like where like a solid concrete process or at least just like the outlines of that are going to be super helpful and like navigating those pieces.
Yeah, the last thing that I would add is that like having, I think in that farmer relationship management plan is going to be a part of like whose decision is it at the end of the day? Like I think for a lot of those things, like the board is going to be the decision making, like for any, like major conflicts or like major decisions that are being made, it's probably going to be a board decision. And, that's why that like leasing representation is so important on the board, I think, to like make sure that that maintains as a through line. And we're having a lot of interesting conversations around like consensus versus majority decision making, and that there are definitely like places for where like consensus feels really important. And so I think, and also it's not likely the most logical thing to be using for every decision that we're making, right? So I think the community agreements, like you kind of mentioned in your question, like that, like those shared values need to all be like, we all need to be in agreement about those. So at the end of the day, we can kind of like be able to fall back on them. And, not necessarily be in a place of like just super, in a oppositional framework. Yeah.
But on the other side of that question, like, I'm curious if there are things that y'all are doing as a group regularly. I know, Kitty, you managed in your farm, you do some family therapy, but like are there other things that you all are doing sort of regularly to help like tend to all of your relationships and sort of like, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. This is what's coming to mind is like going to the dentist. Like what is like the teeth cleaning routine of like your relationships? Does that make sense?
Maintenance.
I think
The maintenance. What are you doing?
it's probably different for all of us, but I feel like a big thing is like we all eat together or kind of around each other. There's like a lot of places where there's overlap of community parties, gatherings, meet and greets. Those all feel really important. I know that West Branch puts on some of those gatherings for farmers, and that always feels really important because when you're in the mix of farming, you kind of have your head down. You're just trying to like get through the season, and organizing on top of that is really hard. But then when you have an event and you see all these farmers from all over the place coming and they're really excited and we're eating like farmed food and there's music, it feels really nice and kind of reminds you that we're not doing this in a vacuum, we're doing this by ourselves. So I feel like engagement outside of West Branch, engagement, throughout the community has been important. We go to pottery, like a bunch of farmers go to pottery and there's um like a big dance party that happens in Stanford, I think like several times a month, like different things like that. All the farmers go to those things too. We go to Wayside. Like there's ways that we have been connecting and building network outside of the program. And I think that has been key to why this is working is because the community is so small. Everything is kind of intentional.
It sounds like there's a lot of love in your relationships.
That thing about
Um,
everybody building the new world together, like
Hmm.
it takes everybody, all of our ideas.
totally. Um, Francis, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned when we were prepping for this, like a process that you went through, sort of where you're like, we know we want to do a community something, but we don't know what like the structure of
Yeah.
that is going to be. And then you kind of landed on a CLT. And I'm just curious if you could share like a little bit about sort of like that process for you all of going from like the seed of this idea to do a community project to actually like choosing the structure that you would
Yeah,
use.
absolutely. I think that that was one of the early, big decisions that we made collectively as a group. I think initially we were under and this effort of pursuing a model kind of similar to, or actually within the agrarian commons model. So kind of like the organizational structure of, larger nonprofit, I think like C3, and then like the subsidiary structure. Um, and I think what we had found that was like, oh, that would make sense maybe if we were in the context where we didn't have some of the community support, didn't have like the technical assistance or the organizational support. But we have a lot of that, like a lot of those pieces are existing assets within this project and in this community. So that doesn't necessarily make sense in this context. So I think that that started us, exploring other ideas of, what kind of entity would hold the values that we have around community and collective ownership and governance, um, and sort of like really kind of prioritizing and centering our relationship to land and really thinking about that, radically and expansively. Um, we went through this process with Pace Law, which, provided amazing pro bono legal support as we were navigating different legal questions around this project. And this was one of the questions that they helped us to navigate. And so I think Rhiannon might have found some of the initial kind of like comparative flowchart legal diagrams. So we're like, well, this thing does this and this thing. And, so we were looking at like shared equity co-ops, or we were looking at, classic kind of cooperative LLCs and different structures. And I think ultimately what we landed on was the community land trust structure. I think for two reasons. One was that, before I got into like the farming ag space, I was in affordable housing policy. So I think I just had some like legacy of CLTs and the prevalence and like the tool as it relates to affordable housing and really thinking about that as like a permanent community asset. Um, and then I think two, it does something that none of the other models did, which was it decommodifies land and it like removes it off of the speculative real estate market, which felt really important for us to not have that kind of relationship with land and to really think about stewardship in this way. So that's like how we landed ultimately on the CLT, and then so after that process of landing on the CLT with Pace, we then spent, another semester with them to, think about our bylaws, think about like the actual like structure, legal structures were needed that we needed to be able to create and hold. And then they helped us also then navigate the process of incorporating as a 501(c)(3) CLT. Um, I think a related question I sus you have here is that if there are other land trusts that we look to for inspiration, other folks that are doing similar work. Um, I think that there's a couple other land trusts that we're in community with, and actually we're developing just a little bit. We're developing a community of practice and want to kind of share out some of our findings in our work. The Stolen Lands Community Land Trust, which is formerly the Unadilla Community Farm, and then also Seba Arbor, which is a farm project within a CLT in Salem, Connecticut. So we can share up some of those resources once that comes up.
The other thing that I was going to share is this, probably some people have seen this before, the Accessing Farmland Together toolkit that Land for Good has put together. It covers more so like for-profit farm opportunities or structures that you can consider. So if a nonprofit structure is not, appealing, these are some good models to be looking at for like how to use LLCs and other, yeah, for-profit entities. If anybody
Okay, it
also
seemed
has,
like
really quick, if anybody has projects that are inspiring them, would love to see those in the chat.
Yes, this is a great time to throw any resources that you have to recommend to the group in the chat, and I'll scoop them all up and add them to our resource list. Um, Phoebe, I saw your hand up, and I think we'll take your question as our last question, and then we'll do a little wrap up. And I want to share an evaluation for folks too. So, you want to ask your question, Phoebe?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Sometimes I feel like I can just articulate myself a little better trying to speak conversationally, but thank you, Bree, so much for everything you shared. I am wrapping up a thesis project on community land trust farms right now. I'm based in Missoula, Montana, and yeah, I have just talked to a bunch of farmers and practitioners working, at the intersection of community land trust and ag. And so, yeah, just feel really excited about all of your work and wish I could have talked to you all too earlier in this process, but you're continuing this momentum for me. But yeah, something that I'm a theme that I'm really feeling arise is this the tension that you all already touched on, but I'd love to just hear you speak a little bit more too. The tension between, living in these systems that we live within, around like building equity and also wanting to decommodify land and trying to, use these tools and bend these tools to do just that and kind of try to imagine alternative relationships to land. But then this kind of question around like who we're asking to do these alternatives and not build equity, for example, or like who is drawn to those alternatives and thus means, who are very deserving of building equity. And so, yeah, I just would love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on that inherent tension of this tool. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was like right top of the list of the limitations of this model is the equity building opportunities. Um, yeah, I think it's a difficult place to be in. Like, yeah, we're like great underserved farmers, like come not build equity in the number one way that people build equity in this country. Um, so yeah, like I was saying, I think the ideas that we've been playing with so far are like, is there the opportunity for people to build equity in their lease in some sort of way where, in affordable housing, there's like the opportunity for people to sell their house, but you know, um, within a controlled model that is governed by the CLT of like it can only increase by this percentage over time or whatever. So I think there's the possibility of something like that. Um, but I think, like a huge one really needs to be in like retirement saving education at all. Like I hear frightening stories from, fellow farmers who have never, have no retirement accounts whatsoever because they've like potentially never had, an employer that offers it to them. And so I'm really curious to learn more about, yeah, like what are the existing possibilities for. I know there's like the US Federation of Worker Co-ops has like shared health insurance they do for their member organizations. So I think there's opportunities to like access some sort of financial benefit, I guess, for these farmers that like we can leverage potentially as a 501c3 that maybe wouldn't be made available to them otherwise. But I don't think it's ever going to like replace the potential, like value of having equity in, land ownership. So I don't think that it's like just because these people are choosing to farm on this land, it doesn't, like exclude them necessarily from home ownership, period. So like I think the housing, like how can we support people to, like maybe have other conversations around like, yeah, home ownership. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the like I totally hear you, Phoebe. I think that this is like, it's certainly a challenge and a really big tension in the CLT space overall in period. But I do think that for me, one of the things that this is, addressing is like it just drastically lowers and reduces the barrier to entry for folks. And I think that that is like such a deep offering that otherwise would not be available for folks that are entering this space. And I think that that's like a key part of the community land trust model that I think like while like limited in terms of the long-term equity building piece, does afford you kind of like the immediate access that otherwise like that, folks spend so many years and resources trying to be able to just like break down that initial door. So I think that that is key. And I think that, there is also like additional component. I think, I was talking to someone who was also running a similar kind of like collaborative, collective land project. It was for profit. It was interesting, but they had like a pro bono financial advisor and planner for the planner. So I think just like how can we embed and build supports for folks on the land to like really think about and maximize where that might not be something that the land is holding, but like where from business, operational, and other perspectives can folks kind of expand into that. And I think that would be key as well.
Yeah, I think for so many people, like you're saying, Francis, it's not that this is preventing them from building equity. It's like, it's not like, oh, I could have taken out a mortgage on this land or I could have, farmed on this community land trust. It's like this option would never have happened at all. So, yeah. And Megan really wants to get the evaluation in the chat, please.
No, I think this is such a valuable conversation, and we've been thinking a lot about it too, in the context of these alternative models. I do want to just invite people. I know people get like itchy right before the time reaches 7, so before people start trickling off, I do want to invite folks to share one last chat box reflection. The something that you're taking away from this learning experience. What's one thing that you're leaving with? Tonight. This is also a great time to share any resources that you'd like to share with the group in the chat. Um, and while you all are putting in your takeaways, I'll just announce again that we have one webinar left in this series. It's potential that it will continue in the future, but we'll certainly be taking like the growing season off with Commons Land in Minnesota, and they have a ton of wisdom and experience to offer. I encourage you to learn about them. It sounds like Phoebe in the chat maybe had talked to them during her project. So let's hear. Oh, let's hear. Looks like Kitty also you wanted to add. As a farmer who gained access through this project process has been instrumental to us building our who we are and what we were able to do. Yeah, Kitty, do you want to say anything more about that? I don't want to skip over the chance for you to answer that question.
No, I was just kind of I was trying to allude or trying to explain that, like, yes, equity is important. It's essential to the sustainability long term of the project, but it's not the only way the project can be sustained. And having the lease on this land has made it possible for us to build community and to build out our network, which kind of sets you up for long term sustainability as well. So there are trade offs to it, of course, but being able to like afford the lease and not have to worry about taxes and all kinds of other stuff dealing with land, being able to like use other people's infrastructure has been really dope. And I know that we wouldn't be as we wouldn't be how we are, who we are without all that support.
Thanks, Kitty. I'm seeing some sweet reflections come through. Nina is taking away a commitment to shared meals, having fun together, and engaging in an intentional family therapy is central to building trust and building community. And Grace, take away ideas for addressing conflict resolution and guidelines for relationship building. I'm taking away just like a lot of gratitude for all the effort you all are putting in. My question that we didn't get a chance to talk about was like, I want to hear more about y'all's like personal journeys from like being farmers to now running this really cool project, and sort of like how you integrate those two parts of your life. Carl, thank you so much. Great to learn about the alternative land access through CLT. Ignacio, nice to see you. Time and building trust. Yes, time, trust, and money, folks. I think these are like the essential elements. These are the themes that are just shining so brightly through all of these projects. Phoebe, thinking about equity in new ways. Yes, and the equity conversation continues. Let's keep the resources and ideas flowing. I learned the Hudson Valley is poppin'. That is so true. You guys have a lot going for you in the Hudson Valley. We're gonna do some Vermont field trips. I heard the word dance party. I'm like, we're gonna come down. We're gonna do some dance parties in the Hudson Valley. Barry, organizational capacity and consistent admin support and infrastructure for incubating new projects. Totally. Thank you so much for the work you're doing on I'm part of a land-based project and would love to support and explore how we support each other. Beautiful. So let's definitely make those connections. I'll share out contact information for these presenters as well as resources that came up tonight. And I'll just again share a great big thank you to Francis and Rhiannon and Kitty and all of you folks who showed up here tonight to learn and be in conversation together. Let's keep it going. I hope to see you again in April. And I'm gonna end the recording now, but I'll stick around if folks want to ask any last questions off the record.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.